Oranges are under threat by pests, and it is up to science to save them. Fortunately, though, oranges don't just contain vitamin C. They may contain science. Once upon a time, a pomelo and a mandarin loved each other very much. The result is the sweet orange, or Citrus sinensis, and include blood oranges, navel oranges, Valencia oranges. If you could imagine it in a traditional orange juice, yeah, that's C. sinensis. We produce 50 million tons of them around the globe every year. You might wonder, looking at this chart, if their citric sibling is sour about that, and, well, you know the answer. Despite all those varieties of sweet orange, they're pretty limited in their genetic diversity, and like a lot of commercial fruits, that makes them vulnerable. Yeah, banana, I'm looking at you, you monocultured menace. In the case of sweet oranges, they're susceptible to drought and cold like a lot of popular citrus. But we got the sweet orange as a product of hybridization, so maybe we can hybridize our way out. For decades, growers have been experimenting with hybrids between the sweet orange and the hardy orange. As you might expect from the name, hardy oranges, or Poncirus trufulata, are great at withstanding cold and other conditions. Unfortunately, their other name is the Japanese bitter orange, so you can imagine the downside to sweet hardy hybrids. By the way, where are hardy oranges on this diagram? Nowhere, because trifoliate bitter oranges aren't universally considered citrus. So, if you're keeping track, sweet orange is a citrus. Sour orange, also a citrus. Bitter orange, what do you mean? How could I possibly have thought that's a citrus? How very silly of me. So, the sweet orange is the golden child of this family, but I mentioned that they're under threat. They're susceptible to citrus greening disease, caused by a bacterium carried by insects called citrus psyllids. That's a big problem for American orange growers because where are the majority of that country's oranges grown? Florida, the happiest place on earth. For insects, that is, including citrus psyllids. Citrus greening disease affects all citrus and related species, and it has been absolutely devastating to Florida oranges. The disease weakens the orange tree, causing premature leaf loss, root decay, reduced growth, and eventually the death of the tree. Fruit from affected trees is absolutely harmless to humans, but it's not exactly tasty either. Turns out that a sick tree isn't strong enough to produce high-quality fruit. The disease is hard to control, transmitted by graft, and, for the moment at least, incurable once the tree has been infected. Florida citrus production has been seriously affected as a result. Annual production is down to 10% of what it once was before the disease arrived in the U.S. in 2005. Citrus farmers and agricultural researchers are desperate for answers. Desperate enough, perhaps, to turn to a hardier solution. You see, the hardy orange isn't just tolerant of cold, it is also resistant to citrus greening disease. Since sweet orange, hardy orange hybrids have been developed for decades for cold tolerance, we actually have some hybrid varieties on hand that might allow us to grow oranges that are less vulnerable, not immune, but at least less vulnerable to citrus greening. Only, we're back to the same old problem. These sweet, hardy hybrids taste lousy. So, agricultural researchers are doing tons of backcrossing with mandarins to try to get these hybrids sweeter and generally keep the disease resistance while losing the off-taste of bitter oranges. But an orange tree takes 3 to 5 years to mature, 5 or 6 when growing from seed. So this is not one of those scenarios where you try something, go like, nah, that's not sweet enough, go back to the drawing board and iterate your way to the solution. When each generation takes years to grow up enough to taste test, it is time to work smarter, not harder. And that's what brings us to this week's paper in Scientific Advances. They want to know what makes a sweet orange actually taste good and actually taste like an orange. This gets us into food science, and for this part of their study, they test 198 orange juice samples. Almost 60 cultivars of mandarin tangerines, oranges, hybrids, even orange juice from plants affected by citrus greening. And they use samples from multiple harvest years where possible. Now, you might think, artificial orange flavor is an entire industry in its own right. Surely there's been plenty of research into how to make something taste like orange, and you'd be right. The orange flavor industry alone is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's definitely a lot of prior research into which chemicals are required to convince our brain that we've had a satisfying orange experience. This study, though, has a larger, more diverse sample than pretty much any of those, and the focus is less on identifying chemicals that will mask the taste of sad orange juice, and more identifying what real sweet oranges make when they're actually happy. So, our study's authors performed gas and liquid chromatography mass spectrometry on the 198 juice samples to chemically analyze them, and they gathered a panel of taste testers to rate each sample by whether it has good flavor and whether that flavor is orange and not, say, tangerine. Between those two datasets, we can now relate the chemical profile from our mass spec to our flavor quality data from our panel. Classic food science, and now we can link varying compositions of flavor compounds to subjective taste experiences. Indeed, our researchers found 7 esters strongly and specifically associated with orange flavor. You can see our orange dots score well at being oranges, and they also had the highest levels of these 7 chemical compounds. Congratulations, sweet Poncirus hybrid. We now have a chemical analysis of why you're so disappointing. But from an agricultural researcher's perspective, these flavors happen for a biological reason. Citrus have limonene fragrance because the plant has a limonene synthase gene. Valencine, a signature of Valencia oranges? Yep, you bet. Valencine synthase. It's not always one for one like that, one flavor compound per gene, but the point is, if we want to find out what makes those 7 orange esters, we're going to have to RNA sequence our fruit. Quick review of what's involved. You've heard of genome sequencing, which lets you identify the proteins an organism can make. That's their whole Crayola crayon box, all the things they can make. Once you know what genes an organism can sequence, you can then figure out, okay, how much of that are they making right now by looking at what genes are being transcribed into RNA. The result is, of course, the protein. We use different techniques to look at each. We sequence DNA to look at the genome, we sequence RNA to look at the transcriptome, and we use a couple different protein sequencing techniques to look at the proteome. Citrus are all closely related genetically, and they share many of their flavor compounds. It's not just oranges have valencine and mandarin tangerines don't. Sometimes it's both oranges and mandarins have the valencine synthase gene, oranges just make more valencine. If we'd sequenced the genome, we may not see what's giving it different flavors because these citrus share so many genes, like valencine synthase. But by looking at the transcriptome, the stuff we're making right now, we can see who's making more valencine synthase, for instance, and how that gene expression related to the previous data we got earlier on chemical composition and flavor profile. So, when our study's authors take a dozen of these mandarins, hybrids, sweet oranges, and bitter oranges and RNA sequence them, they're looking for genes that are highly expressed in fruits with tasty flavor profiles, and to try to identify genes that might plausibly regulate the 7 evil X's. The 7 orange esters that will allow us to grow pest-resistant oranges that don't taste flavorless, bitter, and sad. And you know what? We find it. Our study's authors identify a gene that regulates 6 of the 7 orange esters, and because they are adults who use adult names to name genes, these agricultural researchers name the novel gene citrus alcohol acyltransferase. Oranges express a lot of it, and mandarins and hybrids that are low in the 7 orange esters express way, way less of this gene that purportedly regulates them. So now, that key gene gives us a marker to screen seedling orange trees before we invest years and years into growing them to full fruiting age, allowing us to identify the most promising hybrids quickly and to more efficiently select for tasty, healthy oranges. But let's zoom out and talk about where we're left with this. Sweet oranges are the only citrus that really taste like what you'd think of as oranges. But that means we've ended up with a monoculture vulnerable to catastrophic pest disruption like Florida's oranges have experienced. By regulation, orange juice has to be made from at least 90% fruits classified as C. sinensis, sweet oranges. That's a good thing. We want our food to be labeled honestly. But if we breed more resilient Mandarin hardy hybrids, if they're not botanically C. sinensis, they won't be sold as orange juice. And if you're picking up orange juice at the grocery store, let's be real, you're gonna want the thing labeled as orange juice because you're gonna reasonably expect that's the thing that's gonna taste like orange juice. So this science is about giving our orange juice a better option than grow sad oranges and dump some flavor in there after the fact. By identifying the chemical and genetic elements that allow citrus to actually taste like good oranges, we can breed C. sinensis hybrids that are more disease resistant, can produce what we can legally call orange juice, and will taste like orange, not because of a bunch of flavoring, but because of an evidence-based process of selective breeding that allows for genetic diversity while maintaining the things we most love about this fruit. And that idea is pretty sweet.